Hey, happy, beautiful, amazing day. Dr. Bob Rakowski here. Our next section is going to be all about superfoods, certainly one of my favorite topics. I think superfoods actually started out as a marketing campaign. They wanted to say that certain foods had certain superpowers, but over time it has evolved, and certainly there are a lot of foods that do have superpowers. They've been well studied in the medical literature. They have a phenomenal safety and effectiveness profile. But let's go with the definition. So Oxford Dictionary says a superfood is a nutrient-rich food considered to be especially beneficial for health and well-being. And so we're going to go through a list of them. But, think about these superheroes. I don't know if you're a superhero fan, but, they look enough like humans, but maybe a little different, and they are actually superhuman. They have some kind of superpower, which is used for the good of the world. And these superfoods, same kind of thing. They definitely have superpowers. So we'll come back to this theme again and again. We need to remember that malnutrition is the #1 cause of death on the planet. Literally every country is impacted. Fortunately, we have fewer and fewer starving children, but we have an increasingly starved population. I keep coming back to this because if this is what's killing people, then I believe we're negligent if we don't address it. Sometimes practitioners have a very specific niche. Hey, that's fine, but why not partner them with other people that can help people through nutrition? So, Global Nutrition Report 2020, malnutrition, the leading cause of death on the planet. And think about that. We should have food for everybody. We should have access to good quality food, but somehow, some way, most of our population is getting food, which is not very good for them, not very good then for our entire ecosystem. So our nutrition pyramid at the base, nature's foods. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. Michael Pollen, eat food, not too much, mostly plants, but I'm going to tweak that. Eat real food, eat clean food, not too much, not too often, every color, every day, in a way that honors your genetics, your physiology, and your health goals, mostly plants. Superfoods, that's going to be the second rung of the pyramid. Functional foods, medical foods, third. Multivitamin, multimineral, activated omega-3s, probiotics, D3, K2. And by the way, we'll go through sections that will explain the benefits for all of these. Essentially, when we get to multivitamin, multimineral, we'll explain what the vitamins do, and then just imagine synergizing them all together as nature planned. So there are several websites that will talk about superfoods. This food is called superfoodevolution.com. There's also superfoodsforsuperhealth.com. Their top 10 are very, very similar, and they both agree on the top one. Reishi, also known as Ling Qi, also known as Ganoderma. It's top center in this picture. That is the consensus top superfood on the planet. Since it is the top, I've put more effort into studying that. I've used it for all 30 years in clinical practice. The way that we've been able to share it with people has evolved over time. It used to be tinctures and capsules, but now they're in functional foods and beverages like coffee and tea, which I think is a huge boom because it's easier to get it, more delicious, more convenient, and people will keep doing it again and again, multiple times a day to their benefit. So go to pubmed.gov, Ganoderma lucidum, 1986 PubMed studies. Notice the very first one that comes up in my search, it talks about it as an anti-cancer agent. And so I've spent a fair amount of time looking at that and saying, okay, well, if it's anti-cancer, which cancers? So it's good for breast cancer, prostate cancer, inflammatory breast cancer, leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, cervical cancer, melanoma, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, colorectal cancer, liver cancer, glioblastoma, endometrial cancer, gastric cancer, bladder cancer, and who knows, maybe even more than that I hadn't found because I hadn't read all the articles just yet, and maybe more are being studied. Whenever this topic of cancer comes up, it tends to create a little bit of controversy. So Keep in mind, you always want to have a team, a qualified oncologist, and part of the team should be someone making good nutrition recommendations. And hopefully that's you, because very, very sadly, there are just too many people that don't make good nutrition recommendations to cancer patients. So for years, I've lectured about the perfect storm of cancer. So I'll go back 35 years, Dean Black researcher, PhD, room of about 200 doctors, walks into the room talking about cancer. And his very first question was, how does a hurricane start? And the answer he wanted was, a hurricane starts when conditions are just right. How does a tornado start? When conditions are just right. How does cancer start? When the conditions are right for cancer. How does cancer go away? Change those conditions. So the perfect storm of cancer: low oxygen, low nutrients, high acid, chronic inflammation, immune suppression, usually secondary to chronic distress. So is the world catching on? Yeah, this is a PubMed citation where they estimated the Ganoderma market, US alone, 4.4% of the world's population, $2.5 billion a year. So it's catching on. People are saying, hey, this does a lot of good. How do I get some? So nice article in the journal Aging and Disease. Here's what it said. Ganoderma as an elixir has been around for thousands of years. In fact, it was originally reserved for the royal family in China. And back then, if you were not in the royal family, you were caught with Ganoderma. First offense, they'd cut your arm off. Second offense, they'd cut your head off. I was literally giving a talk one time and someone asked, what'd they do the third time? Well, okay, I'm pretty sure they were joking, but they took this very, very seriously. So Aging Disease says its lifespan extension properties are only the tip of the iceberg. It can do so much. 46 studies under the Ganoderma and longevity heading. So notice what it says. In conclusion, a variety of Ganoderma lucidum extracts have definite anti-aging properties, mainly through antioxidation, so we're not going to rust out. Immunomodulation, and that's a very important term, immunomodulation. So whatever's going on with the immune system, consider it an adaptogen. If the immune system's not functioning strong enough, it can pick it up. If the immune system appears to be overreacting, it can calm it down. And notice that it also prevents neurodegeneration. 232 PubMed studies on Ganoderma and the immune system. So I happen to love this matrix. Our immune system is designed to protect us from things that happen on the outside, as well as, or maybe things that enter our body from the outside, or things that happen on the inside. But when the immune system's out of balance, you might say that there's too little defense or too much attack. Too little defense from the outside, we get an infection. Too little defense on the inside, that's cancer. And they estimate that nearly everybody, more than 99% of people, are going to make between 500 and 1,000 cancer cells a day. So we have at least 1% of our circulating immune system on guard to take out cancer cells. Too much attack on the outside is allergy. Too much attack on the inside, we call that autoimmunity. And here's the deal. If you have an infection, Ganoderma is good. If you have allergy, Ganoderma is good. If you have autoimmunity, Ganoderma is good. If you have cancer, Ganoderma is good. So who's it good for? Hey, how about everybody? What about those people that just want to look better, feel better, live longer? Yeah, it's good for all of those too. So there are 430 unique molecules within the plant of Ganoderma. 79 of those are anti-infective, antimicrobial, anti-parasite. And so there's a lot of synergy among these different molecules. The very first book that I wrote a foreword to, this was nearly 30 years ago, was a book called Herbal Virtues. And here's the very first line. There's a synergy in nature that cannot be duplicated and cannot be isolated. So imagine all the fabulous 50. So you have all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water, working in synergy with 430 unique molecules that modulate the inflammatory process, alkalize the system. 79 of those are antimicrobial. And by the way, when you start looking at functions within the body, if I were to talk about the Magnificent Seven, eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every day, it's also proven to help every one of those categories. So clever picture here. We have a young face and a much more aged face. And understand that oxidation or rusting or stealing of electrons is synonymous with aging. And remember, anti-aging is one of the many properties of Ganoderma. 359 studies on its function as an antioxidant. And NIH published these words, the fact that the reishi, also known as Ganoderma, has 10 times more antioxidants by weight is impressive. And, I don't recall how many plants they compared it to, but it was a bunch, right? You can look that up and see that this thing is absolutely loaded with synergistic antioxidants. And so many people are being diagnosed with autoimmune circumstances or with certain health circumstances, disease circumstances where, the cause isn't known. So many times when someone is labeled with a certain disease, I'll look up that disease and the etiology of it. And way too often it says etiology unknown, suspected autoimmune. So if you suspect it's autoimmune, Ganoderma, according to this journal, can be used to treat and or prevent autoimmune diseases. So I reinforce this point with my patients all the time. The immune system is supposed to differentiate between self and non-self. The story I tell when patients come in, I'll simply ask the question, if you've been diagnosed with an autoimmune circumstance, why in the world would your immune system turn on your tissues and try to kill them? Does that make sense? The immune system loved your thyroid for the first, 35 years of your life. Now it hates it and wants to kill it. Does that make sense? And patients will usually say, no, that really doesn't make sense. And then I might say, okay, let's say that you need a kidney and or someone needs a kidney. And I say, well, I got two, mine work really, really well. I can spare one. How about I give it to your friend or to you? I ask the question, what would be the probability that would work in your body? And they usually say, I guess kind of slim. Yeah, they have to find a match. And even under those circumstances, they give immunosuppressive drugs. But here's the deal. If your immune system recognizes your cells, recognizes them as healthy, well, guess what? It says, wonderful, you're doing what you're supposed to do. But what if it sees them as sick or broken down or is infected? Well, then the immune system's supposed to go after it. So if you were the guard of the military base and you used facial recognition, if this guy showed up, you're going to say, hey, welcome, come on in. But what if this guy shows up? Well, even his own mother wouldn't recognize him. And when we talk about our immune system and autoimmunity, that's what's going on. There is a relationship between cell injury and autoimmune disease. The injury could be a physical injury, a toxic injury, a food reaction injury, an infectious injury, but the immune system sees that cell as a threat. So this article was about finding things that are important for a popular virus, effective for a popular virus. And we're even not supposed to, for whatever reason, share things that work. So I understand that political landscape. So publicly, we're a little bit blocked, censored, I guess that's the word. But privately, I share this with my patients. And we have had wonderful successes within my patient base. When we start looking at cancer, 458 results. Ganoderma lucidum and cancer. So this one is very, very powerful. So I'm going to read it. Here's your PubMed ID. You can look it up, 296-91994. Here's what it says. After more than 40 years of clinical use, its efficacy, safety, and long-term tolerability have been recognized. So what do we look for when we give people stuff? Well, we want it to work, so it's efficacious. We want it safe, so first do no harm. And those long-term tolerability, even taking a bunch of it for a long period of time in sick patients doing a lot of other things, phenomenally tolerable. And notice what it says next. It reduces adverse reactions and improves the quality of life for patients during chemotherapy. Well, let's extend that a little bit further. So This picture is from MIT, and notice what it says. Stimulating both major branches of the immune system halts tumor growth more effectively. So we have multiple ways to get after it. So they looked at a portion of the Ganoderma plant, and notice what it says. It has anti-tumor activity by increasing humoral, which is antibody immunity, and cellular immune response. So there's your PubMed for that. And this one, very, very powerful. This certain isolate from Ganoderma, notice it says it actually abolishes chemo resistance. So a lot of people have heard of insulin resistance. It takes more insulin to get the job done. How about antibiotic resistance? Well, the bacteria learns to fight back against the antibiotic, and ultimately the bacteria is strengthened. And very similar in cancer. If cancer becomes chemo resistant, it fights back against the chemo. So the chemo is not effective against the cancer, but it certainly weakens the body and weakens the immune system. And powerful, Ganoderma lucem abolishes chemo resistance. Very powerful. While we're on the immune piece of data, someone asked me, so this is a fungus, it's a mushroom. Can I take it if I have candida or fungus? And the answer is absolutely. It's proven against that in many, many ways. But this one says it dissolves candida biofilms. I tend to think in pictures. So I think of this boy in the bubble, he's got a protective film around him. Well, candida protects itself from the immune system. Ganoderma is going to melt or dissolve away the biofilm. And it's known that these biofilms are difficult to eradicate with what they're saying their current arsenal of antifungals, unless, of course, they were considering Ganoderma in their arsenal. So what about radiation damage? Well, Ganoderma protects the heart from cancer-induced radiation damage. It actually enhances the killing effect against cancer cells. If we were to look at the brain, Ganoderma is proven to enhance serotonin for happiness, GABA for calm, acetylcholine for memory, and dopamine, which has many functions in the brain. In the frontal cortex, it's focus. In the locus coeruleus, it's extreme joy. In the substantia nigra, it's fine motor control. Ganoderma is also known to induce brain stem cells. It's called anti-Alzheimer's, anti-Parkinson's, and it's even anti-seizure. So again, the accolades and health benefits keep adding up. When we look at the heart, the inflammatory process is considered the #1 risk factor. 3 different PubMeds. It reduces the inflammatory process by 13 proven mechanisms. Well, what about cholesterol? It lowers the bad cholesterol, the LDL, and increases the good, the HDL. How about blood pressure? Again, many known mechanisms by which Ganoderma modulates blood pressure. It's a nitric oxide support molecule. Nitric oxide, 1 molecule of the year. We use nitric oxide to dilate blood vessels. That's good for the heart. It's important for brain health. It's important for immune health. It's also important for sexual function. So all those get better with ideal nitric oxide. And Ganoderma prevents abnormal clotting without promoting abnormal bleeding. So again, many cardiovascular benefits. Fascinating on how it helps detox. So it's been part of every detox I've used for many, many years now. But the case of the frozen addicts was a phenomenal case in Southern California in the early, 1980s. So these were a group of drug addicts that injected a synthetic heroin called MPTP. They all woke up the next day with Parkinson's disease. Well, the doctors on staff, they actually came up with a pretty good idea. They said, guys, we're sorry that this happened to you. That really sucks, but we want some of this drug because we think we can use it to study Parkinson's. We can inject it into animals. They found out that they could cause Parkinson's in a single dose. And for over 30 years, they looked for something that could protect against it. And then in 2018, they finally studied it versus Ganoderma. And here's the title of the article: Ganoderma lucem extract ameliorates, makes better MPTP-induced Parkinson's. As we go further, carbon tetrachloride is known to promote liver failure after a single poison dose. Ganoderma protects the liver and promotes liver recovery. STZ is a type of chemotherapy that actually kills the cells of the pancreas that make insulin. So guess what? Ganoderma prevents type 1 diabetes in these poison pancreases. There's also a study where they infected the pancreas with Epstein-Barr virus, and Ganoderma prevented type 1 diabetes, whereas the Epstein-Barr in the animal model was a solid agent to cause type 1 diabetes. And finally, they even gave it to pregnant mice that were also given a horrific neural tube toxin that would cause neural tube defects, whether there was no brain, herniated brain, or even herniated spinal cord. That would happen nearly 80% of the time with one dose of the toxin. But when they gave the toxin in Ganoderma, it dropped to about 20%. And by the way, that was just one dose. What if they did regular, consistent doses? It's known as the herb of spiritual potency. We talked about that in the stress reset. It's known to calm the body, the mind, and the spirit. And, you know, the body by helping the parasympathetic nervous system, the mind by GABA, the spirit, fascinating that it's been called the herb of spiritual potency, even though they don't give a mechanism that I saw. A combination of studies showing the many, many ways by which it modulates the inflammatory process. Remember that chronic inflammation is a link to chronic disease. We've talked a little bit about the alkaline diet and acid-alkaline balance in the body. The first book I read years ago, Alkalize or Die. I like to look at the positive aspect, alkalize and thrive. The alkaline diet, according to the medical literature, improves bone density, improves muscle mass, protects from chronic illness, reduces tumor cell invasion and metastasis, improves toxin excretion. And now, how does this superfood work? Well, it's actually considered to be the most alkaline food in the world. Now, here's what I tell people. There are 50,000 edible plants. I really doubt they've tested all 50,000. Just up to this point of all that they have tested, this is the most alkaline. So, lot there on number one, Ganoderma lucidum. And by the way, I just scratched the surface of what it can do. But hopefully in just getting through one, you realize that these superfoods have benefit when added to our patient base. Well, what about spirulina? Well, over 2,200 studies on it. And spirulina, many benefits. So notice it says antioxidant. In fact, I think that's ubiquitous across the superfoods. Immunomodulating, that means that matrix again, you can modulate all of the issues, whether it's allergy, autoimmunity, infection, or cancer. And then finally, microbial modulating activities. So I'm thinking that they would basically say, yeah, it's going to kill the bad bugs and promote the good. So this is a microalgae. And I remember being at a nutrition lecture years ago, and the statement was this: green is very much in nutrition like it is in finance. Green is good, and it's really hard to get too much of it. So this PubMed study says it's anti-obesity, it's antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-cancer, and it's antimicrobial. So think about adding things like spirulina or maybe other microalgae to your daily program. So notice this PubMed. It says spirulina is going to reduce obesity by reducing fat cell regenesis, and activating the browning, the burning, the thermogenic effect of fat. So when you start looking at fat, there's white fat, and as this graphic says, it makes you fatter. There's brown fat that actually keeps you warm, burns energy, keeps you lean, and helps to keep you healthy. So what is it that gives brown fat its color? So here's our little tip. It's the presence of mitochondria. Now, think about that. And these scientists said they were trying to figure out how they could leverage beige fat, which is between white and brown, to convert it into either hybrid direction. Here's what I say. I think your body probably knows what it's going to do. So there's our mitochondria within our brown fat. and good for energy production. So I'm a huge fan of success. And Michael Phelps, profoundly lean. Here's one thing I want you to think about. Lean doesn't necessarily serve you in the pool. The more muscle you have, the less fat you have, the more likely you are to sink. But this guy basically swam 7 days a week, 3 to 5 hours a day in a pool that certainly was going to be below body temperature, 78 degrees or so. And they say they actually believe that he converted a lot of fat to thermogenic brown fat. And Michael Phelps had a phenomenal sleep routine, 8 hours every single night, 2 to 3 hour nap in the afternoon. And I'll talk about sleep again and again because it's my personal number one self-care habit. But when you use your brain or body more, you need to recover your brain or body more. The book Peak by Anders Ericsson, they looked at the best of the best in any field, and that's what they found out. The best of the best slept an average of 8.6 hours a night. So we want to work on our recovery. And when it comes to athletes, I've taught athletes all over the world. I say, look, most athletes don't overtrain, but they do under recover. And sleep is a good step in the right direction. So when you start looking at cold plunges, I'm a huge fan. In the winter, I'm going to swim every single day in an unheated pool. I'm lucky I live in Houston, Texas, so it doesn't get too terribly cold. But we know that if you do a cold plunge, it has a number of health benefits. But obviously, dose matters in everything. So you don't want to do too much, or you could have hypothermia and die. If you know of Wim Hof, the way of the Iceman, he seems to violate that. I mean, he has spent hours in freezing cold with essentially almost no protection at all and thrives. And he believes that we can be taught to do that as well. So now we're on number 3, goji berries, and over 1,200 studies on goji berries. And notice they're talking about antioxidants. And again, antioxidation, anti-aging, anti-rusting, part of what we like to do. But this study calls out several things. Health benefits include hemopoiesis, so actually making of blood elements, anti-radiation. Now, what kind of radiation? Are we talking ultraviolet light? Are we talking potentially X-rays? Are we talking 5G? Are we talking gamma rays, right? There's different ways that it can help against radiation. Anti-aging, anti-cancer, improvement of immunity, anti-oxidation. And by the way, to me, these just look really, really appetizing, that beautiful red color of that berry. So now when we start looking at radiation, notice what it says: protective effect against X-ray radiation. So X-rays are going to be certainly worse than too much sunlight. It's going to be worse than 5G and other things like that. So if it can protect against the worst, can it protect against the lesser radiation? I don't know that it's been studied, but I believe that the answers are there. There are people that are all over the world moving off of the grid because they feel that the electromagnetic frequencies that they're exposing to are bad for them. And there's different types of protective devices that people wear. So, you start looking at 5G, and 5G is going to be somewhere in this range. And notice what they talk about: ionizing radiation. So we're talking about UVA, UVB, X-rays, gamma rays. And remember this Marvel comic, The Incredible Hulk, Doc Bruce Banner, belted by gamma rays, turns into the Hulk. So I think as a kid, when I first heard that, I had no idea what a gamma ray was, but scientists have known what they are for a long, long time. It's a powerful ionizing, mutagenic, or destructive form of radiation. So while we're on that topic, guess what? Ganoderma protects even against gamma radiation. So we circle back to our number 1, and these superfoods seem to be good at that. And there's a reference on protective effects against radiation and chemotherapy. So fascinating there. It also enhances the killing effect of radiation while liver cancer, while protecting the normal cells. So if you're going to radiate that tumor, you can kill that and protect the rest of that beautiful structure, and even protects against sun burn. So now we're on aloe vera, and look at this. Isn't it fascinating? The PubMed goes back to 1868, over 3,700 studies. I think aloe vera was certainly one of the early superfoods that I was exposed to, whether we're talking about aloe vera juice, aloe vera gel, aloe vera to put on a burn or an injury. But this is an aloe vera plant cut open. You see that absolutely beautiful wonder of nature gel. So antibacterial, antiviral, anti-cancer, immunoregulatory. There we go again, balancing that immune system and hepatoprotective. Maybe this pandemic of autoimmunity, which we seem to have a bunch of it, maybe we're just not getting enough nutrients that help our immune system to regulate. Pretty fascinating there. So here's what it said. It merits testing as a therapeutic agent in treatments of cancer and immunopathologic issues like autoimmune, inflammatory, and allergic disorders. So nice picture of that beautiful aloe vera gel. So in that previous study, they talked about this IDO. Notice what it says. It's one of several immune response checkpoints that may be involved in tumor immune escape. So here's what it says. IDO is secreted by cancer cells and T regulatory cells. It causes oxidation of tryptophan, which cytotoxic Ts need. So IDO, indoleamine dioxygenase. And there it is, a novel natural indoleamine dioxygenase inhibitor. So notice what it says. Treatment with aloe vera caused significant reduction in severity of experimental model of multiple sclerosis. So wonderful neuroprotection there. Our next superfood is hemp seed. So I find it fascinating. This was in the category of the plant cannabis. So first studied in 1917, then a very, very flat period until relatively recently. Why? Because there was a stigma associated with hemp. Now we pretty well know it's a very good superfood. So what are the benefits of hemp and maybe in particular CBD? Well, it's cardiovascular, cancer, neuroprotective, rheumatoid arthritis, dermatitis and skin issues, sleep and mental health. But I was at a Texas Chiropractic Board licensed renewal seminar a number of years ago when CBD came out, and they gave us a pretty good caution. They said, you know what, if you're going to use CBD, we recognize it's a very good plant, but make sure you're partnering with a really, really good company. And they told a story about a chiropractor that recommended CBD for a patient, and it was not from a good company. No, it was not from a purified source. And this person tested positive for a drug test and lost his very lucrative job and turned around and sued the chiropractor. So we always want to do our due diligence to make sure that we're providing healthy, clean products to our patients. So CBD in the brain, it's proven effective for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and multiple sclerosis patients. And in fact, I know a lot of people that utilize CBD that love the anti-inflammatory benefit and the calming benefit. And big part of this when they're talking specifically about CBD. So our study demonstrated that when hemp CBD products are consumed in normal quantities, even over the long term, they do not test positive for cannabinoids. So notice at least 85 different cannabinoids have been tested. So if you go with the idea there's a synergy in nature that can't be duplicated and can't be isolated, there's got to be a lot of synergy among those cannabinoids. So what about this one? He Shu Wu root. It goes by a different name. Made the top 10, interestingly enough, but only 52 published studies that I saw in PubMed, but also known as Foti root. They call it a tonic herb, so tonifies the body in Chinese medicine. Notice anti-aging, anti-alopecia. Isn't that fascinating? So multiple forms of alopecia and autoimmune autoimmune form, an androgenic form, a protein malnutrition form, even a thyroid-induced form of hair loss, anti-cancer, antioxidant, antibacterial, anti-hyperlipidemia, anti-atherosclerosis, and again, immunomodulating and hepatoprotective. So keep looking across the board and you see that these superfoods good for the immune system, good for anti-aging, antioxidant, liver protection, etc. So it was fascinating that there were some bad press on this particular herb, so I decided to dig into it. So they basically had ideas that the liver was being injured by people that were dosing with this Hishu Wu or Fodi root. And this 2020 PubMed said, however, improperly using the processed PMT can cause liver injury. And PMT is what? That polygonum multiform thum, another name for our Hishu Wu root. So again, quality counts, manufacture counts, delivery system counts. Next, Camoberry, 56 PubMed citations. First one talks about obesity and gut microbiome. But a little more thorough. Again, it's an antioxidant, anti-hyperglycemic. So we've got one that's good for blood sugar, anti-proliferative. I'm going to assume they mean abnormal proliferation like cancer and tumors, antimicrobial, anti-hemolytic, anti-inflammatory, anti-hypertensive, to name a few. So it was fascinating that they studied animals with the standard American diet. So high fructose, high fat, I said fructose, high sucrose, high fat fed mice given camo. They did not get weight gain. They did not have fat. They didn't have the inflammatory process of endotoxemia. And there was improved glucose tolerance, insulin sensitivity, et cetera. So do you want to protect against a bad diet? Sure, but my favorite protection there is to not eat it. But if you're going to, maybe you do some camo berries with it as well. Kelp, one of my favorites, over 2,300 PubMed studies. This is going to be a seaweed type product. I've used it for iodine benefits over the years. But notice what it says: kelp, great nutritional value, rich in vitamins, minerals, dietary fiber, protein, polysaccharides. And then it's also antimicrobial, antiviral, great for the liver, great for the heart, anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, anti-cancer, immunomodulating, hypolipidemic, anti-diabetic, and antioxidant. So kind of with that mindset, green is good. It's hard to get too much. And a beautiful picture of kelp. And I'm guessing there are many, many forms. So can seaweed prevent cancer was the title above this picture. And if you start looking at epidemiologic studies, it seems that people that eat more seaweed have less cancer. So that part's good. But notice it says it exerts anti-tumor effects and on angiogenesis and micrometastasis for the triple negative breast cancer. Bee pollen, one of my favorites. We go back a long, long way, again, 100 years almost, with studying of bee pollen. Over 1,800 PubMed studies. So now let's look at what the benefit of bee pollen is: antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, cariogenic. I had to look that one up, prevents dental caries, antibacterial, antifungal, hepatoprotective, anti-atherosclerotic, immune enhancing. And so notice what they said: the application of bee pollen can be challenging because of wide species specific variation. So how many bees do you have? Well, you look at the data, not enough. They're actually calling the global loss of bees a threat to the ecosystem, but they're being exposed to herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, genetically modified plants, and other things. But bee pollen is the male seed of a flower blossom, which are collected by honeybees and mixed with the bee's digestive enzymes, fascinatingly enough. So nature's own processing. And there are plenty of honeybee products. So we could start with honey, pollen, propolis, royal jelly, beeswax, bee venom, all with antiviral activity. And notice the final line there, 2021, including those caused by human coronaviruses. So you look at all the things that we've shown that are good for the immune system, they're all readily available. Why in the world wouldn't the world enhance their health as their optimal strategy? I hope people are waking up to the idea that, healthy people don't get sick. Maybe we should promote health, and certainly with good nutrition. So finally, we're at maca. That wraps off the top 10, 59 PubMed studies. And notice enhanced reproductive health, anti-fatigue. I'll get into reproductive health and libido in a moment because it's said to be good for that. Antioxidation, neuroprotection, antimicrobial, anti-cancer, hepatoprotection, immune modulation, good for skin and the digestive system. So, double-blind study, maca root may alleviate SSRI-induced sexual dysfunction. So that is one of the challenges with SSRIs. They even have something that they call retarded orgasm syndrome. So people have a hard time essentially climaxing in the sexual act on SSRIs. But this shows that maca is good for that. And if it's good for that, it's probably good for other types of sexual dysfunction. And notice it says it has a dose-related effect, and it may also be good for libido. And another study on triple-negative breast cancer looks like maca has some benefit there as well. I want to go back to this global functional drinks market, projected to be over 200 billion by 2024. People are realizing that, why do we make food choices? It's got to taste good. It's got to be convenient. It has to be affordable. The number 4 choice is health. This is a convenient and effective way to get it. Definition of functional beverages, again, a non-alcoholic drink that contains non-traditional ingredients which claimed to provide specific health benefits beyond those of general nutrition. So when we go with functional beverages or functional foods or even medical foods, I've talked for years also about the dirty dozen, the 12 things that rob our health. And I personally use functional medical foods that help the body to detoxify, including clearing heavy metals. They are functional foods to modulate the inflammatory process, functional foods to enhance the immune process, functional foods to enhance digestion, also seal and heal the gut, functional foods that are good for hormones, whether we're talking about insulin or sex steroids or thyroid, very powerful there. So in our food pyramid, remember, if God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. We talked about the top 10 superfoods. The functional foods or medical foods, I will often have people do an intense week reset with that and superfoods and a multivitamin and the activated omega-3s and the probiotics and the D3, K2, and only vegetables and superfoods during that week. And for a functional reset, pick whichever function or dysfunction the patient seems to have the most choice. I've said for years, when in doubt, detox, but you might go with when in doubt, seal and heal the gut. When in doubt, modulate the inflammatory process. When in doubt, make insulin better. When in doubt, process out the toxic xenoestrogens. All of these are available through functional foods. I like a 1-week reset with only functional foods, superfoods, and organic vegetables as the macronutrient intake. And again, functional beverages, over 80,000 PubMed studies. Coffee as a functional beverage, over 3,300 studies. Again, I have found these to be absolute booms in my practice, because remember, your program is only as good as compliance. Good tasting functional foods, functional beverages, functional coffee, functional tea dramatically improve compliance. So that wraps up this wonderful session. And as always, I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful.